County's live webinar on the 3 T's of small business marketing, simple research for powerful results. I'm Mike Clem, a business mentor here at SCORE Fairfield County, and I'll be your host. Our presenters today are Bob Walker, along with Susan Catalano and Robert Clark. More on our speakers in just a minute. At the next slide, please. First, let me provide you some brief information about SCORE. SCORE is a nationwide organization including over 11,000 volunteers and more than 300 offices around the country, providing free advice to small business owners. SCORE Fairfield County is comprised of more than 130 volunteers with a wide range of industry, process, and subject matter expertise. We offer the 3 primary services to small business owners shown here on the screen, all of which are free. Please go to our website at fairfieldcounty.org.score.org to learn more. Today's webinar is sponsored by Pitney Bowes. Pitney Bowes has been a longtime supporter of SCORE education programs. Joining us today is Crystal Bai, Manager of Small Social Media Marketing and Analytics at Pitney Bowes, to say a few words. Crystal?
Thank you. Hello, everybody. First of all, I would like to say thank you for inviting us to this webinar, inviting myself. I remember, just a couple years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, I was sitting in on webinars just like this to enrich myself and, get to the level of knowledge that I have today on digital marketing, and all of these things were enabled because organizations and volunteers like yourself. So thanks a lot for putting this together. Pitney Bowes, again, this is not a sales pitch, just kind of introducing ourselves as, I have learned so much about small businesses also through Pitney Bowes because the endless support that in the past 100 years we have offered. A little bit about what I do, and I really hope that I can also offer some support and any expertise that the audience would need in terms of digital marketing. I analyze overall social media data, and I'm able to turn those insights into marketing strategies and how to develop content and ads that really gears towards your audience. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, and congratulations to Pitney Bowes turning 100 this year. So this is a great mile mark, and I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Crystal, and thank you, Pitney Bowes, for sponsoring this webinar. Let me provide you with some useful information about today's webinar. We set aside time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. If you have a question, please use the chat window at any time during the presentation. It's located in the lower part of your screen. Our webinar will end promptly at 1:00 p.m. to respect your time. The session is being recorded, and the link to the recording will be available at fairfieldcounty.score.org within the next couple of days. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today's webinar. Our main speaker today is Bob Walker, who is the CEO of Surveys and Forecasts, which provides strategic marketing research consulting services to companies of all sizes, from startups to Fortune 100 firms. Prior to founding Survey and Forecast in 1994, Bob had a career in marketing research for national consumer packaged goods companies. He writes regularly on current trends in marketing research and specializes in new product development, customer satisfaction, and demand forecasting. Susan Catalano is managing partner of JQ LaCourte LLC, a full-service consultancy providing comprehensive LinkedIn-based marketing, business development, and employee advocacy programs for businesses and organizations. And finally, Robert Clark is managing principal of Lucid Point LLC, a boutique online marketing firm providing email marketing and marketing automation programs for businesses and organizations. So now let me turn it over to Bob.
All right, very good. So this is Robert. We're going to move right along, folks. And Susan, you're up.
This is what we're going to cover. This is an overview of what we will cover today during this presentation. So small to medium-sized companies are under more pressure than ever, right? We always need to be flexible, agile, be able to adapt. Now, post-COVID or during COVID, even more, we're under a tremendous amount of uncertainty. Research can be a key differentiator for small business success or failure. And so to be more certain, so to be fact-based versus opinion-based is the key to doing research, as well as objective versus subjective. Measurable rather than anecdotal evidence. It's really a key distinguisher. Research, marketing research does not need to be expensive. There's a wide span, a wide range, and a clear takeaway from today will be things that you will be able to apply right away, and also know when you'll need an expert, at what time you'll need an expert for the specific needs that you have. And this one is the key objective of why we're here today. It's for you to really start to think about how you can plan and execute marketing research to provide some real insights into your business. Small is beautiful. I think most of us will be very surprised to hear that small businesses, less than 100 employees, make up 89% of all businesses. And less than 10 employees is 81% of the business, less than 5, 70%. That's a compelling number. 77% of the businesses have less than 500,000 in sales. And that little table there to the right can give you a sense of the employee range and number of businesses. All right, Robert Clark, you're up next.
Thank you, Susan. So now we've got sort of the landscape a little bit, and we wanted to draw some distinctions here. We want to make sure we are clear on what we're talking about: marketing versus marketing research. So let's start with what is marketing itself, right? And marketing is not selling. In this context, we're drawing a clear distinction. And what's the difference? Marketing really focuses on products and services and determining what those should be and developing them to meet customer needs. But selling is, we're small business people, we wear many hats, and selling is important as well. And selling is a noble profession and a noble activity. So we're going to say selling is about navigating customer buying environments and interpreting their requirements, etc., in any given situation. Marketing comes before that. That's understanding what your customers and clients, what they will really need, and in baking that into your product offerings for your salespeople, or to be sold by your salespeople or you when you switch hats. So now that we know what marketing is, let's talk about or let's define anyway, what is marketing research? In terms of marketing research, every company should be focused on two primary activities: differentiating your product and service offerings, or even your business, and marketing those things. Marketing research listens to the don't listen to your computers. Enough of that going on. Marketing research listens to the customer, your customers, and you take that information that you find by listening and guiding your differentiating and your marketing efforts. So rounding out what your offerings are going to be and getting that information out into the marketplace. So with those two bits of definition, I'm going to now turn it over to Bob Walker, the real expert here on marketing research, and we're going to go through the 3 T's. Okay, here you go, Bob.
Thank you, Robert. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Yeah, so I want to say some thank yous to my co-presenters, Robert and Susan. I also want to thank SCORE Fairfield County, and a special thank you for Pitney Bowes for sponsoring this series on small business and small business marketing. When we originally thought about a way to help educate small and medium-sized businesses about their marketing operations, we wanted to make a conceptual model for any business to follow. And this is what I had conceptualized when we originally sat down to think this through. All business operations can be supported with three different functions. One is what we will call targeting, which is the gold box, testing, which is the green box, and tracking. This is the 50,000-foot view that I want you to keep in mind as we proceed through the slides. So let's focus on the first one of those three T's, which is targeting. Targeting involves a few activities. One is identifying who your target audience is. That may be self-evident, but it's a little bit more complicated than it might first appear. The second is to determine the best way to reach your target. And then the third is to determine the best way to communicate your story or your message. So these three bullets are really the who, the how, and the what. In the last part of this, the messaging, I would like you to keep in mind as we go through the slides, because this is turning out, based on all of the academic and other evidence, to be the most important component of the targeting initiative is your messaging, or in some circles, marketing circles, your positioning, your story. The second of the three T's is testing. That's the green box to the lower right-hand side of the process. You can think of testing as your go, no-go action standard step in the three T's. Testing involves the evaluation of ideas. Sometimes we call them concepts. It involves advertising, so that could include type or duration of advertising as well as format. It includes messaging, which I alluded to earlier. That can include positioning, and we'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a bit. And then the last are your product or service attributes or features. That could include things like display activity or product mix or your store layout if you're in a retail environment. All of these things and more are testable ideas, testable concepts, testable things that you can employ in your marketing plan. The last of the three T's is tracking, the blue box. Tracking is focused on conversions. Conversions could be sales, they could be clicks or impressions, they could be ratings, either 5 stars on an Amazon independent seller site, or consumer reactions or ratings to things. Website visits, they could include a host of other metrics that we'll get into a little bit later. But all of this is designed to monitor how well your overall marketing efforts are doing in the marketplace. Okay, so that's the 50,000-foot view. Let's drop down to, let's say, the 1,000-foot view. We'll talk about targeting. And remember, this whole process, this whole conceptual approach is designed to continually feed information into your business operation. That's the whole goal of this, is to support the business. So when Robert was talking earlier about what marketing is and what marketing research specifically is, marketing research is all about the eyes and the ears of the marketplace and feeding the operational components of the business through each of these steps. And I'll also just parenthetically add, you don't necessarily have to follow this in a classic sequence. You could, for example, if you have an idea, you could go out and test it and determine whether you have a business opportunity. You could go out and monitor the market for a little while. But what we're showing you here is sort of the classic sequence of what the steps look like in most organizations. Go ahead, Robert. So the targeting piece, we're dropping down to a 1,000-foot view now. Who is your audience? That's often a more difficult question than it first appears. We can often describe our target audience physically, characteristically, with features such as age or sex or income or life stage, and sometimes even attitudes. If we've got a convenience-oriented target versus a do-it-yourself target, or we have someone who has desire for emotional rewards versus physical or monetary rewards. Those are ways to describe your audience. The other part of this question is, how do you reach your target? You can use, as Crystal was talking about up front, you can talk about things like either paid search, organic search, social media, earned media, public relations, personal branding. Susan Catalano, for example, is an expert in personal branding through LinkedIn. There are a whole host of tools that you can use to reach your target depending on what your target looks like. The third part is, how do we communicate your message? Is it a problem solution story? In other words, customer has a problem, I have a solution. Put the two together, you have a market. Or is it an emotional message? Are you doing public service announcements? Are you trying to reach the emotional center of your customer, reward them emotionally in some way? Or let's say you're a restaurant. Are you providing a sensory experience? Or if you're a spa, are you providing some kind of a physical experience? So the question here is, what is the best way, and how is the best way to communicate your message? There are multiple dimensions. You don't necessarily have to only use one of these. There may be more that I'm forgetting at the moment, but the whole point of this is, it's not just who you want to target, but how you want to tell your story. And then the last part of this is, start with some assumptions. We have to start somewhere. No one knows exactly what the customer looks like when you start, especially if you're in an entrepreneurial or startup mode. You're trying to figure out who the customer is, what their needs are, and then you need to go out and validate whether your assumptions are in fact correct. That's part of the testing phase also. Robert, I think you're going to take the next slide.
I am. This is one of my favorite slides here. Anytime I can put a photograph of Alec Baldwin up in from the movie Glengarry Glen Ross, I take that opportunity. And so, one thing when you're targeting, another dimension to this, in addition to all of this, is understand how your customers or your prospects are going to convert, however conversion is defined, or whatever conversion piece you're measuring. So you just really need to understand what steps they're going to take, because your other aspects of how you're targeting and messaging in particular are going to be variable based on that conversion path. So what do we mean by that? Do they have to come, whatever, if it's sales, or if it's a sale that you're measuring, that's the conversion you're looking for. If they have to physically come into the store, into a retail location, that's one thing. If they're buying online on an e-commerce site, whether it's a Shopify site or let's just leave it at that, a Shopify site or through Amazon to fulfill the product, that's an entirely different conversion path. So you just make sure you understand that, because that's an important part of constructing your research program to make sure that you're measuring and testing and measuring what you need to test and measure.
Very good.
Back to you, Bob.
Thank you, sir. Yes, that's sometimes called the AIDA model, used often in marketing courses throughout the planet, across the planet. Okay. So back to targeting, I want to touch on a few things about what research can help you do. Research can help you better define your target. Sometimes you don't know who the target is until you go out and do a broad scale piece of research, sometimes called a market study, sometimes called a segmentation study, segmentation research, to give you insights on who your target really is. The other part is, you need to refine your unique selling proposition. This is a common phrase that's used in marketing circles, and you probably have heard it before. What is your USP? What is the thing, the product, the service, the feature, the benefit, the overall composition of your offering that makes you unique? What is your USP? The other part, and really Robert's slide before touched on this, what is the customer journey? What are the touch points? What are the consumer touch points in the steps before conversion? One of the things that is very timely in terms of understanding the customer journey is what we call multi-touch attribution, trying to figure out where the touches are along the customer journey and making sure that you're present at each of those touch points in the steps leading up to conversion. And then the last part is to identify important end benefits, key selling points, the things that are persuasive to your target. Are you saying the same thing that every other competitor is saying? Are you off strategy? Are you tone deaf to what your customer is really looking for? What are the end benefits that your customer is really seeking? And use that to better size your market opportunity. If people are very price focused on a particular category, then coming in and saying, that you're also price focused may just get lost in the noise. But if you're price focused and you have XYZ and benefits, then all of a sudden, all the heads turn towards your offering, because price of entry in the category is a low price, or is a large pack size, or whatever it happens to be. But the whole point is, find the place in your market where you can be unique, and then leverage that unique set of and benefits to your best advantage. Moving on to sources that you might use to help you target more effectively. There are a lot of publicly available and low-cost sources that are out there that you can use to try to understand how big your market is and what your market might look like in terms of both the descriptive as well as some of the attitudinal things that we've been talking about. And that's why I think it's really important for small and medium-sized businesses to really think about their end customer in ways that they can reach them more effectively, because the ways that we have now, the fire hose of data that comes out of the internet pipe, provides us with a tremendous amount of information that we can utilize to help refine our strategy and also refine our target audience. So one of the most obvious ones, and parenthetically is free since we're all paying for it through our taxes, is the US Census. One of the best sources is business and county data patterns within the Census Bureau of Labor Statistics to assess potential demand. That's the website. There's also a mothership, if you will, government data site called data.gov, which has not only links to all of the census data, but all of the other data sources within the federal government. It's massive. You have to have the patience of Job to navigate it, but the data is there if you want to spend the time. Some other sources are prepackaged research reports. One of my favorites is a website called Statista, but you can also buy prepackaged reports from, strangely enough, a company called Package Facts. Usually you'll end up paying somewhere between $2,000 and $4,000 for a category study, which might be a little expensive for an entrepreneur or a startup. But if you have maybe a little bit of a budget, it's money well spent. They cover the waterfront on a whole host of categories. If you are trying to locate, for example, a retail store or a retail establishment of some kind, one of the most fascinating developments in the last couple of years is the availability of GPS movement from cell phone data. One of the best providers of that is a company called SafeGraph. SafeGraph was widely used when we were looking for travel patterns during the expansion of COVID infections. So it's a very good source if you're interested in trying to find out where you might want to locate a retail establishment. There are others, but that's one that I find very useful. And then some of the other ones, just in terms of feeding your knowledge base and helping you triangulate on what your market might look like. Obviously, networking is extremely important. Finding other people that have similar interests, special interest groups, SIGs, sometimes they're abbreviated as. Meetups, business networking groups. Find places that you can use to help inform your decisions. Local libraries are great sources. Often they have EBSCO or Thomson Reuters databases, online access to a whole host of things. And then find experts or others who are knowledgeable about your specific industry. Join special interest groups that are, again, focused on your particular area of interest.
Hey, Bob, it's Robert. I have a question. I have
Yes.
a question back on SafeGraph.
Yes.
Bit of a sidebar, but how much detail do you get there? Do you just get a number of phones, or do you get any personal detail, or how deep does it go?
Yeah, you get anonymized information with timestamps, with latitude and longitude. So you would feed that data into something like a visualization tool, such as Tableau. You can create very powerful animations off of that data. So it's individual timestamp data for individual cell phones, which are anonymized.
So if you wanted to know what's the traffic flow at a particular location, say
Correct.
after work or as the
Correct.
trains get out, you'll see the burst
Yes.
of data there. Okay,
Yes, it allows you to narrow down the geography to, let's say Route 1 in Norwalk, or a street or set of streets or city block in a particular city. I believe they have trial accounts also, so that's another possibility. Some of these, websites, data sources, census notwithstanding, but allow you to go in and explore and download small sets of data so you can learn and test and see if it works for you.
Very good, thanks.
You're very welcome. So a couple of examples of how we might think about targeting is in the areas of personalization and customization. Took a swallow of coffee and it didn't go down the right pipe. Personalization and customization are really where it's going to be at now and into the future. Very common in e-commerce, where we have big data running the show in many cases, and it's been proven over and over again to improve satisfaction levels and boost conversions for many different types of businesses. So if you get, dear customer in your email communication as opposed to dear Robert, or we noticed that you are one of our valued customers versus we noticed that you bought 5 pairs of chinos and 3 shirts from us last week. That kind of personalization and customization becomes very powerful because all of a sudden the consumer, the customer, the receiver of that information suddenly starts to think, wow, they really do know who I am. So the question is, now that we have the ability to do some of this personalization and customization, can you solve your customers' problems in a personalized and customized way? Can you link that information, if it's coming from your database, can you link that information to what your customers' needs are? Can you dovetail that effectively with what the customer is looking for? And can you provide a solution that's better than what your competition has available? The overall objective of this is how can you continuously improve to meet customer needs and to make sure that they are loyal and return to your store, website, e-commerce site, whatever, repeatedly, because you're providing an experience, an actual shopping experience, a purchasing experience that's unique and different and customized. Okay. So moving on, a couple of examples to demonstrate what I'm talking about, and these are fictitious. I don't have a cousin named Phil who owns Super Suds, but let's assume there's a guy named Phil, and he owns a car wash named Super Suds. What if Phil had the information on the right-hand column of this table versus what he currently knows about his customer on the left-hand side of this table? He's got a customer named Mary Smith. The basic facts that Phil knows about Mary is that Mary Smith has some Connecticut license plates when she comes to the car wash. We know that she owns a car. We think that she commutes about 15 miles to work each day because she lives in a couple of towns over and she stops by on her way either to or from work, and we know that she goes to Super Suds. But what if Phil had much more detailed information about who Mary Smith really was? Well, the detailed information is we know that Mary Smith is 31. She's a married mother of 2. She lives in Fairfield County. We might even have her town. She drives a 2017 Honda Accord, which is her pride and joy, and she does everything she can to take good care of it. She thinks of her car as her sanctuary, where she listens to books on tape. You can show I'm an old millennial / baby boomer when I use books on tape. I should say audiobooks. Expands her horizons and escapes from the world. Her car reflects who she is and shows that she takes good care of her things. So, okay, let's say Phil wants to develop a messaging and communications and a positioning strategy to reach customers like Mary. If he only has the things on the left-hand side of this table, it's a pretty flat message. But if he has the things on the right-hand side of the message, think of all of the personalized communications that he could deliver to Mary as his customer. Think of the skinny data on the left and the really rich data on the right. That's really what the whole personalization and customization is about. So let's move on to a slightly different slice of this same approach. This is Tom, who owns Tom's Tires, no relation to me. We have some basic facts about Tom. Tom's Tires is on Main Street. He's been selling tires for 20 years, and Tom sells many different types of tires. If you were to craft a USP off of those basic facts, what could you say that's unique about Tom's Tires? Not a lot. But could Tom grow a more successful and thriving business with persuasive messages by rethinking his business with the points that I've highlighted on the right? Tom's Tires is actually conveniently located next to Whole Foods with convenient car drop-off and pickup for routine tire service. Tom's Tire's extensive experience makes sure that you are always matched to the right tire for your special vehicle. Tom's Tires carries more tire brands than any other dealer, guaranteeing you a range of options to fit your budget. So again, I mentioned earlier the who and the how. This is the what. This is the messaging. Look at what you see on the left and how it makes you feel, and look at what you see on the right and how it makes you feel about Tom's Tires. The whole point of the marketing communications piece is that you want to create, that's not one word, that's two, craft and create messaging that is not only persuasive, but also creates that USP. And that's what I'm trying to demonstrate here. So on the one hand, on the first slide, we talked about the personalization and the customization. And on this side, we're talking about the messaging for the business. So there are a couple of ways that you need to think about to craft the story effectively for your business. These are some basic examples. So thinking about general targeting strategies, I want you to think about loyalty from a couple of different perspectives. Loyalty is a strategy that you can employ to grow your business, even though you've got customers that are already loyal. And by that, I mean loyalty by itself is a good thing because loyal customers are sticky customers. That means that they come back over and over and over again. But programs that emphasize and reinforce loyalty are really good if you are in a business where you've got lots of transactions, what we would call sometimes fast-moving consumer categories. So there are a lot of buying opportunities. So these kinds of programs, loyalty and targeting programs for loyal customers, are typically most effective when you've got transactional environments, grocery, drug, mass merchandisers in retail. If you are a restaurant owner, a pizza shop, a coffee shop, a car wash, an automotive center, or if you're providing personal services. These are all ways to leverage the concept of building a loyalty program. Simple concepts are things like, punch cards, punch 10, get one free, loyalty rewards. Every time you go to Walgreens, they spit out a $5 coupon, good for 7 days. Same concept for small and medium-sized businesses. There's no reason why you can't keep track of your customers, reward your most loyal customers with additional benefits. They don't necessarily have to be products or services. They could be, they could be something completely different. But the idea is that you reward loyalty with additional ways to make that customer come back and see you again. I want to talk also about the concept of relative loyalty, if you will. Loyalty doesn't mean exclusivity. Just because a customer is loyal to you doesn't mean you own them and they are exclusive to you. Loyal customers just mean that they go to you more than all of your other customers. So focusing on loyal customers still is a good strategy because customers who are loyal and even loyal competitors to their brands are unlikely to buy their entire category needs from one place. So if you go to a car wash, chances are you might go to a competitive car wash. If you buy your shoes at DSW, chances are you might go to another shoe store to buy another pair of shoes. It doesn't mean that your loyal customers are exclusive to you. It just means that they're loyal, they're more loyal than your other customers. So one of the things that we recommend that from a strategy standpoint that you consider doing is to find either other customers or non-buyers from other, competitive non-buyers who fit the same profile as your most loyal customers. That could be demographically, that could be attitudinally, that could be on some other dimension that I'm forgetting at the moment. But the whole point is that you ought to look at your customer base and not assume that just because Joe or Mary or Frank or Bill or whoever comes in once a week, that they're loyal only to you. Another part of your targeting strategy should also be to focus on what we call in the research and advertising world reach, which is another way of saying awareness, penetration or awareness. Reaching or expanding your message to as many people as possible. We know from a lot of academic and other business research that the process is a customer journey. It's a multi-touch journey. It requires multiple impressions. in order to get to the point where awareness is generated. To Robert's earlier slide about awareness, interest, desire, and action, awareness doesn't happen until multiple impressions have occurred. Oftentimes, it's in the double digits or more. I think this data, correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, I believe that this is either Facebook or Google data.
Google.
But Google. Okay, so this is for direct mail, you need 5 touches before there's a conversion. And a conversion could be an inquiry, fill out a web form, or make a phone call, or actually make a purchase. For online, the number of touches is 10 in 2016. And by 2019, we're up to almost 20, 18.2. And that's because so many other people are out there advertising, messaging, sending you things, flooding your inbox. So the ability to break through is getting harder and harder and harder. So the concept of maximizing reach, multiple touches is extremely important. You should be thinking about that, not only in terms of advertising, but also in terms of organic search, direct mail, from your database, etc. Another is for new product, services, or launch, just keep in mind, it is a numbers game, even within your target. As tight as you've defined your target, it's still going to be a numbers game of repetitive exposure before somebody makes a decision. Over time, loyalty does distill out, but you do have to be in it for the long term. It can't be a hit and run kind of thing. It does take time to build awareness and then ultimately purchase and loyalty. And remember that not every customer is equally valuable or profitable to your business. We spend a lot of time getting new customers, but a lot of times customers are simply shopping the deals. So remember that there is a heavy half, the 80-20 rule, if you remember that, keeping in mind that not every customer is equally valuable. Okay, so that's the targeting part of our 3 T's. Let's move on to the testing part of our 3 T's. Again, we're dropping down from the 50,000 foot view to the, let's call it the 1,000 foot view. So why test? Well, testing, we're doing testing all the time, whether we realize it or not, whether we're doing it informally or formally. Testing is how we learn about what works and what doesn't work for your target. We have to be out there continuously testing to find winning messages, products, formulations, new ideas, etc. And as you learn, you adapt your strategy to fit what your new information is telling you. So again, remember, we're talking about a circle. The 3 T's are a circular process. One step is informing the next step. And so one of my favorite quotes from an old business professor is, all you have to be is right. You could guess, you could be right, but if you're wrong, it could be an expensive disaster. Now, really, at the end of the day, we're talking in some cases about a risk-reward relationship. If the risk is low and you fail, you might not have risked a whole heck of a lot. If the risks are high, you better do your testing. I mentioned earlier in the targeting piece, loyal customers. Consider doing your initial testing of a new product or an idea or a service. Consider testing that idea among your most loyal customers or your best case prospects. They're the ones who are the most familiar with your category or your company or your competitors, and try to test things conceptually at first and try to do it objectively. One of the things about testing is we talk about being objective. Susan mentioned this up front, being objective, trying to be empirical. So test your ideas in the form of concepts that you can use to gain insight into your product or message. I'll give you a couple of really quick examples of what these might look like if you're testing a new idea. I worked with a startup that wanted to find out how serious people felt this particular problem was that is described here. And I'll give you the really quick rundown. About 3,000 children are rushed to the emergency room every year, infants, mostly babies and infants, because they swallow one of these coin batteries. And the more powerful ones are made with lithium. And it is a choking hazard, but the more serious consequence of this is that the viscous membranes in the esophagus make the battery generate electricity. There's conductivity, which produces a burn. So the question is, what if we could come up with some technology to prevent this from happening? So the startup wanted to try to understand among moms with children how serious they thought this problem was, whether they thought a solution that prevented this was a good thing, and parentheses, yes, exclamation mark, and then how much they'd be willing to pay for that solution. So this was one example, and this is a standard concept or idea that we expose in research, and this is the format that we often use. The next one is a more technical concept. Again, some of you might be in startups where you're exploring technical ideas or technical concepts or engineering concepts. This is actually a concept we tested with veterinarians on how to monitor a dog's health after they leave a surgery center. So we had 3 or 4 different versions of this with different types of sensors, and we evaluated which one of these 3 or 4 different ideas was best. So again, they tend to follow a somewhat similar format where you have either a headline or you have a description, you have a visual. Sometimes you include price, sometimes you don't. But again, this is how larger operations and enterprises evaluate ideas, but there's no reason why a small to medium-sized business can't do the same thing. Write up something that's got a description, show it to your customers, and keep track of how they react to it. There's nothing preventing you from doing something almost the same. Okay. One of the things that we also test is the message. Sometimes we call it in the research world creative. This could be a print advertisement or an advertisement in the format I just showed you. It could be sometimes what is called animatic, which is a cartoon-like rendering of your advertisement. Sometimes we can test full motion video produced advertising. So your message can be evaluated in lots of different ways. Typically, it's done with words on a page, and you can evaluate it in both a qualitative as well as a quantitative environment. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. But the question is, how does your message resonate, right? How do people feel about your message? What kind of emotion or feeling is being conveyed by your message? How does it make your target consumer feel? We found from other research that the impact of the message of the creative on conversion, and conversion again could be just visitation to a website, click on a form, or actually a sale. But the impact of the creative itself on conversion can be as high as 80% of the total set of variables that is being considered in your media plan or your marketing plan. So it could be, 10% is search, 10% is direct mail, but the message itself is 80% of the persuasive power. So in other words, if your message resonates, the teacher will give you an automatic B. Not too bad. So the goal of your initial efforts when you're trying to launch a new product or service, or you're trying to communicate your story, is to focus your efforts on the creative, on the message. That's where you get the most bang for your buck. I want to just give you a little sense, as in the time that we have, on what is out there in terms of tools that you might want to use to collect some of this data. There are the obvious ones when you're doing survey research work: paper-based, web-based. We also have text-based surveys, question-answer text surveys. There are a variety of online tools. Some of these you may have heard of: SurveyMonkey, Qualtrics, Constant Contact, Google, Office 365. SurveyMonkey in particular offers a free trial account, lets you ask up to 10 questions, 100 responses. All of these features, all of these tools have really good starter features. SurveyMonkey being the most commonly used one. I think of the probably 15 or 16 million SurveyMonkey accounts, probably 10 of them are free, 10 million of them are free accounts. But I would suggest, if you have interest, to check out some of these survey tools. I'll just give you a quick snapshot of some of these platforms. Some of them include templates. This is from SurveyMonkey. The upper left-hand corner, I think, is very timely. They actually have a template to show you how well you're performing in the coronavirus environment in terms of your leadership skills. But they have customer satisfaction templates and other types of templates. This is an example of what the actual survey environment looks like, where you build your questions, you can develop themes, you can resort to picking questions from the question bank. but this is what the environment looks like. It is a bit technical, and if you are a little daunted by this, this is when you would turn to someone who could assist you with this sort of thing. Qualtrics has a very similar kind of platform. The features in Qualtrics are very, very sophisticated. This is how the big boys play and the big girls. This is enterprise grade, lots of bells and whistles, very sophisticated tool, and one that I've used for many years. I think, Robert, you were going to take on the constant contact tool.
I am. So I just wanted, so many folks, many smaller businesses use Constant Contact for their email marketing, and Constant Contact has a couple of different ways, as do many, I'm sure MailChimp does, and the other ones as well. But I just wanted to show you Constant Contact. So in the context of an email, if you're going to send out an email piece, you can put in a poll, right? So this, on the left-hand side, you can see the blocks that you will drag and drop into your email template as you're building it. And normally you're up on, up here with images and text and maybe a button. But down here where the blue arrow is, there's a polling block that you can put in there, and here's what it looks like when you click on the settings for that polling block. Put your question in and give a number of different answers, and then remember, poll is just select one, right? So this is a very simple piece of testing, but it's most likely already in your email marketing account. This might be the results you would get from that. It's probably already in there. Unless you have a really basic one, you might need to upgrade to the higher level one to get that feature. Constant Contact also has a survey tool as well. So if you click on the Create button, depending on which account you have, you'll see all of these types of things that you can add. And these are separate, right? So it's this survey would not be in an email. This survey would go to a link, much like SurveyMonkey, a link that you would share and click through and have folks answer the survey questions. And they have a number of different types of questions, which you can see here on this slide. Single select, a multiple choice, and you have one of 5 things. You click one, you can click only one, or click 2 or more on a multiple. So there are again, it has some sophistication to it, and you can see text and scale and rating on a scale, ranking items. And the other thing that this features, which again, SurveyMonkey undoubtedly has, Bob, is skip logic, so that if you answer a certain question one way, it can skip further on down and pass up some of the other questions. And the objective here is to keep it short and sweet. So that's definitely something worth looking into as well. It might be something you already have. Office 365, for example, if you're an Office 365 user, which again, a lot of small businesses are nowadays, look in there and see if you've got this feature called Forms. I don't know which license you would need. It would be more than just email. But if you have an E2 or an E3, you probably have this. Look in there, and again, they call it a quiz. It starts with a quiz, the different question types, and you can see you've got these other, you can have a net promoter score, one of Bob's non-favorites. You even have that option in there as well. So they're all in some of the tools that you have been, that you are in fact familiar with. Susan, this one's yours.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Testing. Some other things you can do, leave your office, visit stores and ask questions. If you don't have a brick and mortar, pick up the phone and ask your clients as well. It's another great way to do some testing. Also, follow competitors on social media. Seek out certainly similar companies, possibly in nearby geographies or even in outside geographies as well, just to kind of test ideas also. A little bit more sophisticated consumer panels and focus groups are great ways to get to test as well. Many companies maintain lists of individuals who are certainly willing to participate in survey research. Back to you, I believe, Bob.
Yeah, yes, Bob, you're gonna take it home here, and
okay.
We've got it's 12:49. We're gonna leave a couple minutes for questions, so Here you go.
Okay. we'll
And I
move quick.
do want to, Bob, just before you start, I see there's 1 or 2 questions in the chat. Feel free, others, to write some other questions in there. If you have one, if there's time, we'll certainly get to them.
Very good. Okay, so types of questions. The key thing here is to remain objective. So as opposed to leading questions such as, don't you think this is a great idea? As opposed to, please give us your rating on how you feel about this idea from excellent support. Try to be objective, try to be unbiased, and focus on questions that don't have loaded language so that you get honest evaluations. Open-ended questions are great to elicit comments and suggestions, and we tend to avoid yes/no questions and try to instead find out why. You could certainly prompt a question with a yes/no, start with a yes/no, but also say, how come you feel that way, or why did you say that? So get as much information as you can without being a pest. Just as a frame of reference, the optimal survey length from all of the work I've done over the past, God knows how long, 25 years, online especially, is about 12 minutes. When you get to 15, you're starting to push the end of the envelope, and when you get to 20, you start to really rack up the incentives that you need to compensate survey participants with. Thanks. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so when we're evaluating ideas, some of the questions that I typically include, especially if it's a concept or if it's a new product idea of some kind, is how likely would you be to buy it? That's typically a purchase intent scale from definitely would to definitely would not buy. Open-ended likes and dislikes about the idea. Typically, we will code that question to get thematic responses, themes underneath the verbatims. Other questions include uniqueness, believability, value, whether it solves a problem or whether it's superior to other solutions that they already know about. So with that, let's move on to our final T of the 3 T's, which is tracking. And we don't spend a lot of time on this because there are, I think, a lot more interesting things to talk about in terms of the first 2. But tracking is really essential because one of the things that I've always felt is if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, right? So you can only manage what you measure, and you need to find some way to monitor how well your performance is doing. The second part of that is if you are able to, over time, look for trends. What SKUs or stock keeping units, SKUs, which ones are doing well, which ones are not doing well, and try to focus on what we'll call the hard measures, units, dollars, customer lifetime value. So that kind of information comes from unit sales, dollar sales, what is the % of your sales that end up as returns? What is the frequency of purchase of your customers, especially your most loyal customers? And what's your renewal rate or your repeat rate? So these are some of the hard measures you can look at. Strive for a regular reporting process when you can to assess your progress against your objectives, against your target goals, your awareness goals, etc. Some common tools that I've seen are comment cards. Very commonly, you'll see those in restaurants. Text-based survey tools are great for things like events or groups. Send out a quick blast, get feedback in real time. If you have a customer relationship management platform, HubSpot, Salesforce, or something else, use that to trigger post-transaction surveys. Or if your POS system has the ability to integrate with those, that could be a really good tool. Look for other sources of feedback. It could be Facebook, Google, Yelp. Watch the ratings if you have an e-commerce site and the customer comments on the e-commerce site. Try to find ways to tease apart some of that feedback, and try not to have too thin a skin about that, because people can be, as you probably know, a little hostile when they're giving negative feedback. So try to view it with an objective lens. One of the other things that we can do when it comes to tracking is using an advisory panel. It could be an advisory board. It could be a group of customers or clients that give you feedback on some kind of an ongoing basis. That's very helpful, particularly in service businesses, but it could also be retail or some other physical store. Satisfaction studies, I do a lot of work in this area using a couple of different tools. You probably have heard of Net Promoter Scores, or NPS. That's a very common platform to use or approach to use in corporate environments. Customer satisfaction studies or another type of tracking tool. But you don't need a lot of sophistication to just see how you're doing. You can do a lot of reporting with very simple tools like Google Sheets or Excel, SurveyMonkey, Constant Contact. Some of these other tools have charting and graphing capability already built in, so that can be very helpful. And then set some bands around your data. So if it drops below a certain point, as demonstrated on the next chart, you can see where a problem might be. This was a satisfaction study I did for an online grocer, and they had a drop off in their satisfaction scores. We drilled into what was going on, and they found all kinds of problems with a particular set of products that were being ordered through their delivery system. So with that, let's just kind of summarize where we've been and what we've learned. When we talk about marketing research, we're really talking about a few things. One is listen to your customers. That's what this is all about. Don't be afraid to get the feedback. It can really help your business stabilize, reorient its focus, and grow. Be careful of your own biases. We all have them. We all can get in trouble with our biases, but just remember, a customer's feedback to you isn't necessarily about you as a person. It's about you as a business and the services and products that you offer. So keep that in mind. Take every bit of customer feedback that you can as an opportunity to improve. Gut instinct is great, but it can only get you so far. You need to be objective about what you're doing. Again, test, test, test. Use the tools that we mentioned. Robert and I covered previously. They're really great, very affordable, and they're, for the most part, fairly easy to use. And don't spend time reinventing the wheel. Get expert advice. If you need help, go out and seek an expert. We've got 3 on this panel. There are others out there. We'd be happy to chat with you. So again, thinking about the 3 T's, what have we done here today? We've given you a straightforward way to think about marketing research. It's not just for big companies, it's also for small and medium-sized businesses as well. We introduced you to 3 fundamental activities, research activities that all marketing-driven organizations need to think about and really embed in their business operations. We've given you ways to think about how to assess your customers and your prospects, what they're thinking. We've given you examples of research projects that we've done and we've worked on, and I think we've learned from and can share that knowledge with you. We've given you examples of tools that we use. And I think probably most of all, we want to encourage you to embed this thought process of continually researching and investigating and exploring and feeding that data back into your business and helping you become a more marketing-oriented organization. And the last thing is, don't be afraid to just start. Just start and get going with getting feedback into your organization. So with that, I will turn the podium back to you, Robert.
I'll go back to Mike, I guess. But,
and then back to Mike, I guess.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Well, thank you. You know, we got about a minute for a question or two. One I see here is from Jane is, can you put a YouTube link in a CC email, Robert?
Yes, you can. There's a module in there that you can put the YouTube link in, and it'll either bring up the it'll pull a frame from the video, or you can embed that YouTube link behind an image.
Okay, great. And maybe one time for one more here is Reference USA. It's a tool available at most libraries. Do you all have an opinion about the effectiveness of this tool to help you define markets, et cetera?
I think all of these tools are useful, and many are available at libraries. I would just, I'm not aware of all of the tools that are out there. I'm aware of many of them, but yes, that's another good one. Info USA is another one. But yes, go to your local library. The resources will vary a little bit, but it's a great place to start.
Okay, hey, that's great. And that's all the time we have for questions today. Just as a reminder, recording this webinar and the materials are available within a couple of days on fairfieldcounty.score.org. Our next webinar is this coming Monday at noon on how to develop a business plan in 6 easy steps with John Harmon presenting. Please check our webinar to register for that. And again, SCORE offers free counseling, and please go to our website and click the Request a Mentor button if you'd like to get some free counseling. And please fill out the evaluations that you'll be receiving in your email at the end of this webinar. Bob, Susan, and Robert, thank you very much for presenting today. Thank you to Pitney Bowes for sponsoring today's webinar. And thank you all for attending today's live webinar. Have a nice day, everyone.
Thank you all.
so much.
Bye, folks.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.